All right, so what I used to reamp this thing, this bass track, was Guitar Rig. And that's one of my favorite amp simulators. So let's wait a minute for this to bring itself up. I have presets. Seagrass JCM800 for guitars, Seagrass Growly Bass, Seagrass Clean Guitar 1, Clean Bass Compress 2, Compress 1. I have all kinds of stuff. It's a great starting off point, and I really, really like to have, again, customized presets. It's not that I'm going to live with them, but it's a great starting off point, and it's something that I like to call my own. So I used the Seagrass Clean Bass Compressed channel. So it's got a tube compressor, it's got your amp and cabinet, all right? So let's have a quick listen here. Now, back when I prepped this a couple days ago, I'm sure I must have brought the treble up, because hear all that reverb and that pick on the string. You're gonna want to hear that. This guy's playing straight eighths through the verses, carrying a lot of, again, a lot of weight, propelling the song. I'm not really hearing a whole lot of usefulness in the mid-range. It's mostly a treble thing. The compression's adding a little more sustain to whatever low-end note is happening there. I really like that. So I basically reamped this guy, and we printed that mix, or excuse me, printed that track. What we're left here is with the new bass print, and I've kept the original bass print. In order to get that to sound a little more present, I've used the DBX 160. The hardware version of that is a renowned bass compressor. I mean, it's just a great box. And the U80 version, the emulation, seems to me to sound really, really close to the hardware version. What are we doing with this thing? Yeah, not really destroying it. You can see the lights here. A lot of it is below the threshold of compression, just kind of tickling during the verse. These eighth notes are just compressing a little bit, not too much. I have a tendency not to hit bass guitar too hard. I kind of like to hear bass guitar kind of bloom. I know that maybe in modern mixing, an incredible consistency is what you're looking for, especially when you're talking about car audio with great big subwoofers, a low end that just transfers note to note, always smooth, always the same strength. I'm talking about the super low end stuff, where it's just hitting you the same every note. I think that works better for EDM than it does for rock and roll. I've got a wall full of vinyl over here in my turntable. I'm always listening to records from rock's earlier days, 60s and 70s especially. And one of the things I notice is that bass guitars are, back in those days, they're kind of coming and going. I'm always audibly hearing a lot of pick or finger sounds, the higher frequencies, but that low end is not always hitting you in the chest. Depending on what note they're playing, depending on the key of the song, depending on how long the bass player is letting the string ring out, you may not hear that note as strongly. You'll hit like an F, and it won't be that loud. The bass player goes down a step to an E, or down a half step to an E, and that's the open string, and all of a sudden, boom. Back in the old days, we would just let that stuff go. That's how a bass sounded. It wasn't always compressed to smithereens, just completely obliterated. And I try to remind myself of that all the time, that this is not electronic dance music where, you know, a super consistent low end might be what you're looking for. I don't know that compressing the hell out of a bass guitar is the best thing for the song. I think that some of the complaints people have about modern rock and maybe some pop production and mixing being sort of lifeless sounding, I think a lot of that stems from people specifically trying to control things a little too much, specifically their low end. Let things breathe a little bit, and in a well-constructed song, you may not get a whole lot of low end out of your bass guitars until the chorus. Well, the chorus will breathe more because maybe that's when they start to play more open strings, or they get to a note that resonates more. You know, a G will resonate more than than a B flat, depending on whether it's a PV or a Fender bass. I mean, it's all very specific, and I think that it speaks to what this band or this artist had in mind. They made conscious or maybe unconscious choices as to what instruments they used and how they played them, and the keys that the songs that they wrote based on how things felt in the room when they were playing them. And if we, as mixers, are undoing some of that, I don't know if we're serving not only the song, but the clients that have hired you to come along and help them out. So that's a long way of saying, I didn't compress this bass very much, just a little bit. And I turned the output gain, because again, I kind of like the way it just sort of sounds coming through the DBX. And sometimes I won't compress it noticeably at all. Everything will be below the threshold. I just like the way it sounds through a DBX 160. So we now have a blend of the two. That's the original. That's my print. That's the two of them together. Now, they combine in a way that's maybe even a little phasey. Maybe some cancellation going on there. But what I found is that in the mix, they combine in a way that helps that bass stand up in the track. By the way, let's listen to a couple seconds of it here. Now you can hear that's a busy bass track. I mean, the bass player's playing eighth notes throughout the intro and the verse. Busy part. So a ton of low end is just going to muddy the plane, make it difficult for anything else to make itself known. It's a percussive part. Let's treat it like more of a percussion instrument, and that's what we've done.